hunting. And so you have Ducks Unlimited and other Trouts Unlimited, where they actually stock land, buy land to not preserve it, but use it. They'll use it for farming and wetlands and grow rice. And then when the ducks come, duck hunters go out and get their take of ducks, and then the rest of the ducks fly to Mexico. But the conservation movement was the greatest good for the greatest number for the longest period of time. Now, at the same time, of course, exploitation, which began in the early development of this country to clear the land for farms, and then clear it for mining, and then for railroads, and then for manufacturing, and then for the auto industry, and then for World War II, and then the aviation industry, and the computer industry, and on it goes. And the space program, and cell phones, and iPods, and any gadget you can think of. I have never read this book. I think I should. I just love the title. I'm just enthralled with the title. It's the best title of a book I've ever heard. It's so fitting of the American dilemma about its environment. This book by Neil Postman is called Amusing Ourselves to Death. I couldn't think of a better phrase. It just sort of wraps it all up for me, amusing ourselves to death. But Neil Postman also wrote a book called The Disappearance of Childhood. Many people are now beginning to ask ourselves if in our headlong race to exploit resources, develop everything, we've built a generation of kids who are cut off from nature. Now there are books like The Last Child in Nature, or Nature Deficit Disorder. You know, kids don't get enough nature. They're in the house watching TV or playing video games, and they don't go outside very much because there is no outside to play in. Kids nowadays don't have orchards and open fields. You got a street, a sidewalk, and neighboring houses. That's it. Well, Neil Postman's book, The Disappearance of Childhood, has a beautiful quotation in it. And it's one that if any of you are planning, by chance, anybody in here planning on becoming a teacher? You got a good role model in the room. Think about it. Somebody's got to carry this message. Somebody's got to keep the flame alive. Do it. It's the best job you'll ever have. It's like the Peace Corps slogan. The hardest job you'll ever love. And also the best one. I used to tell people like my friend Gary Klee, every beginning of a semester, I'd come in and say, hey, Gary, it's time to go. It's showtime. Oh, Frank, you're nuts. You know, we got to work again. I said, Gary, we even get paid to do this. Can you believe it? This is great. Anyway, Neil Postman's quote about kids is that children are the living messages we send to a time that we will never know. Children are the living messages we send to a time that we will never know. Now think about this, that your grandparents and parents that have lived their lives pretty much, grandparents maybe are gone, mine are, my folks are both gone. And the message they sent was just a reflection of the culture they lived in at the time. The culture was that you could buy happiness, that things would equate with happiness, and the more things you had, the more prosperous you were, the better off you were. You had a higher standard of living, and the goal was that you would give your kids an opportunity to have even a higher standard of living than what you had. This was the American dream. But after 2 or 3 generations of that, most working Americans and most, I think, thinking Americans have come to realize you cannot buy happiness, and you can't really continue to kid yourself into feeling you're happy just because you have a lot of stuff. Now, the exploitation continues on to this day. In my time, luckily I've seen a lot of good changes. It used to be when people first started asking me to maybe give a talk about my environmental studies work, they said, well, what changes have you seen since you started teaching this stuff? This would be like, okay, after 10, 12 years at Wilkin High School, and then maybe after 10 or 15 years at San Jose State, and here a little bit before the program here got started, and at Soledad Prison, teaching. I'll make sure you understood the difference there. I'd say, well, we recycle, we don't blow smoke on each other, that's it. But now when people say, well, what kind of changes have you seen? Are you encouraged? I say, you bet I'm encouraged. You bet. My friend Sigmund and I have worked on 43 solar homes. Stuart, I don't know how many. He's done. This program is here. I can't believe they got curbside recycling in every house in Santa Clara Valley just about. They even pick up your lawn clippings in case you don't know how to compost. You can go buy organic food, Whole Foods all over the place. They're like what Safeway used to be. Prius cars, Honda Insight. General Motors finally got smart. You know, the Volt car is really almost like what they invented 35, 45 years ago with the diesel-electric locomotive that replaced steam trains. A diesel train is not a diesel train. The diesel combustion engine does not pull the train cars. There's a diesel engine, maybe 8,000 or 10,000 horsepower, monster diesel engine. That thing runs and turns a generator, which then, with heavy cables, goes to motors on the what they call trucks, or the wheels of the locomotive. So it's really an electric-powered locomotive. The electricity comes from the diesel engine hooked to a generator. The Volt car that Chevrolet is going to build has a gasoline engine and a generator to power the electric part of the car and to charge the batteries. So we're beginning to see that movement. When I was first teaching in Willow Bend High School, I'll bet there weren't 90 buses in what they used to call at that time the San Jose lines. They're just called San Jose lines. There were about 90 buses. Now there are about 750 or 900 buses. There was no light rail. Caltrain was down to about 4 passenger runs a day, 2 in the morning, 2 at night, because they'd been talked out of passenger service by that GM buyout of trolleys and passenger service on trains. Now that's expanded. The aviation industry, I think, is probably going to become eventually a thing of the past. Just watch. Fuel prices keep going up. You know, who's going to pay $2,000 to fly a plane somewhere? Maybe we'll get smart like Europeans and have faster trains. Limited people will use planes, just like when they first came out, they were expensive, and only a few people flew on planes. For a while, planes were like the Greyhound bus. You know, everybody took them. Now, it's going back to only the well-to-do, people who have a lot of money. I think the organic food movement and the greening of America, people putting solar electric on their homes, passing laws so that utility companies have to give you credit for the electricity that you generate at home. And Jill, you folks have solar electric. Kristen does. I do. And I think, well, that's right there is the best way. Teach by example. You know, you can say to your students with a straight face, you know, I left today, it was sunny, my house is earning me money. Now, your house is costing you rent money. But if the day I got on that bus, I'd look out the window and make sure I saw the sun shining. I'd know that my passive solar system was working because I'd left the heater running again. There it was, right out there, 89 million miles away. It's just so simple. Life is so simple and so beautiful. It amazes me that with all the beauty and the enduring repetition of that beauty that happens every season, without us doing anything to make it happen, without us doing anything that can really stop it, the seasons come back. Pretty soon my little fruit trees out in the backyard are going to lose their leaves. And my yard will look bare and barren and gray and kind of drab for December, January, February. And then about March, little weeds start growing in the wet soil. And then pretty soon you see a few little green buds just dotting like babies all over the branches on the trees. And pretty soon those things pop out and unfurl as a leaf. And you tell me if that is not a miracle, that when the weather starts warming up, the sap that has been pushed downward, and there's so little sap that the leaves fall off, can't live. That sap is down in the roots. When that soil warms up, it's nature's way of saying to that tree, time to wake up. And the sap starts going uphill, back up into the branches. And all the genetic code, all the miracle that says, oh yeah, by the way, this little portion of your DNA says make a leaf. Oh, there's a million of them. Go ahead and make a million leaves. And then these little parts of your DNA say make pieces of fruit. They come out a month later. They do it without me doing anything. If I died, they'd still do it. They will do it. They will do it year after year until the tree gets so that it dies. But all that has to happen is a peach stone or a plum or a prune falls in the ground and another tree grows. And its DNA says do the same thing. And coming out of the soil, just water up into that tree. Who's the steward of that? I don't know. You can believe anything you want. Certainly not us. If you believe in God, if you believe in nature, God and nature to me are kind of coterminous. I think, you know, it's impossible to really know what God is because if it's this supreme intelligence, we tend to anthropomorphize it, try to make it into a human-like thing. But if you understand the concept of infinity, you understand that Earth and the whole solar system and the whole universe are an infinitude upon infinitude of miracles and things that you just cannot comprehend how they could have ever started, how they work. All you can do is stand back and admire their beauty, the repetition, your dependence on them. Whenever people come to my house and start giving me a bad time, engineers are always the worst. They'll say, well, why did you buy a solar hot water system? You got one right here. I said, well, this one makes free hot water, and that one I have to pay PG&E for the hot water. They say, well, that's not free. You had to buy that thing. I said, yeah, I did. And they said, so it's not free. I said, well, let me tell you. Let me go a little farther. I can see you're not a believer. So I have to kind of, you have to sometimes play cards with these people, I said, this thing cost me $3,400 25 years ago. At a modest $20 a month savings, it's about $250 a year. This system paid for itself in about 13 and a half years. That was 12 and a half years ago. And at $250 a year, that's about $3,000 I have in my pocket now. This thing has earned me $3,000 after it was nice enough to pay itself off. So I love when the engineers come on tours. School kids are a little more innocent. They just, oh, wow. I said, you can live in a house like this? I'll bet you're going to live in a house like this. This little 10-year-old kid says, yeah. And you can just see the little eyes just thinking, wow, wouldn't that be neat? We'd have like a solar tree house. I say, well, could be. Could be. You don't know. Kids have just wild imaginations. But this greening of America, it's part of the environmental movement. It's part of the conservation movement. Because people that, even if you have a Prius, even if you have a solar home, we use electricity. My house still uses electricity. At night comes tonight, I turn the switch on. That's PG&E's juice now. I gave it to them during the day, but now I've got to buy some back at night. Somebody had to build the bus that I came up here on, so I'm part of an industrial society. A truck brought my organic food to Whole Foods over on Hamilton and Baskin. Except I've now become a tomato snob. I only eat tomatoes from my own garden, and then when they're gone, that's it. And never eat tomatoes anywhere else because I know they're no good. Now, Julie brought some wonderful tomatoes, homegrown tomatoes, right? But, if you go to the store and you get those things, they're like a red tennis ball. The skin's about 1/8 of an inch thick. You could probably bounce it on and play tennis with those things. They just don't have any flavor. A homegrown tomato. There's this guy, Tom Prine, has a song he's got from Texas, Austin, Texas, whose motto is Keep Austin Weird, which has unfortunately been stolen by Santa Cruz people that say now keep Santa Cruz weird. But see, it's that imitation attitude. It's like they're trying to relive the past over there. But anyway, so Austin really does have the slogan, Keep Austin Weird. And this guy, Tim Prine, has a song, and one of the lines in the song is, there's only two things that money can't buy, true love and homegrown tomatoes. He said it all right there. Now, when it comes to this interplay between the natural world and the world we have, it helps to develop your own perspective. You're going to get a lot of Julie's perspective, other guest speakers, and out of it will come your own. I like this quote here. I came across this just recently in I think it's either Nature Conservancy or Sierra Club magazine, but there's a woman named Charlotte Perkins Gilman. She's an author and lecturer. She wrote an autobiography years ago in 1935. And in it is the importance of understanding that your own vocabulary, words that you use convey the values that you hold. And I'm saying how you communicate to people reflects the inner you. Now, you can see how that works. I mean, you talk real nice and lovey to somebody. The person standing near is going to say, they're a couple, I'm sure. Listen to that. Boy, that's great. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, you can tell when people are mad at each other. And those words that they're saying are conveying how they don't value that. You hear people on the bus, and they'll say, why do you always, and they're kind of in a loud voice, and it's not going to be a good conversation after that one right there. Or, how come you never, you know that one. Or, where were you when you said, okay, these are going to be bad times for that guy. But this one is beautiful, because these words this woman looked at from the Buddha, Siddhartha, the enlightened one. It is told that Buddha, going out to look on life, was greatly daunted by death. He said, they all eat one another. And that is the natural scheme of things, isn't it? This woman said, Buddha went on and called it evil. She said, I examined this. I changed the verb, and I say, they all feed one another and call it good. So it is important, I think, to have a perspective on how you fit into things. Yes, animals, are part of this kill and be killed thing, but they are feeding each other. They have a purpose. All the way down to the ants, the beetles, the worms. They break down all the waste and turn it into soil, which grows the plants, which grow the flowers, which grows the fruit, which grows the grains, which feed the herbivores, which feed the carnivores, which feed the omnivores, which feed us. Now, these are my favorite topics: food, shelter, transportation, energy, wilderness. This has pretty much been kind of looked at for now because of the time. Food, the notion of vote with your fork. Start developing a little personal philosophy. Where's your food come from? You eat bananas from Ecuador? How much energy does it take to ship bananas all the way, 6,000, 7,000 miles? Do you really need to eat bananas? Maybe you ought to think of something that's grown a little closer, maybe grown in this state or grown at least in the United States. Again, do you want to eat animals or do you want to just let them be? Now somebody might say, well, pigs and sheep and cows and chickens don't live out in the wilderness and they're not a natural wilderness animal. Well, if you've ever seen how those food animals are treated and how they're raised, you might have a second thought about eating them. They are raised in some pretty filthy conditions. All you have to do is drive on Interstate 5 past the Harris Farms one day, and if I was the owner of that company, I wouldn't put a sign up saying that was my company, just because the stench of it would, and you'd be better off to just say, sorry folks, keep going, Sam, just something like that, something real simple, innocuous, not identified. Shelter, what's your house like? Everybody in here I hope is recycling by now, but what about your energy conservation? What about your water use? You still wasting water, mowing a lawn too? That's kind of a double whammy. You waste water, and you got to mow that darn thing. Now, knowing how lawns in this valley are, unless you live up in Los Altos Hills, those lawns are so small that kids can't play football or baseball on them anymore, like in the old days when, there was a lot of room on the yard. But now the land values are too high, so the yards are small. Put in a native plant landscape. They're beautiful, they have flowers, they're colorful all year round, they don't go dead. Native plants really co-evolved with soil and climate since the last ice age, when the ice and snow melted away from Yosemite after carving that beautiful valley out during the Pleistocene age. There's a miracle right there. What else in your house? You got TV going all the time. You need to have that background voice playing on the TV all the time to keep you amused. You always got things clamped on your ears so you can kind of isolate yourself from your family. You're always on the phone. Got the heat turned up so you can walk around in t-shirt and shorts in the winter. You got the AC turned up in the summer. Are there ways to heat and cool your home? And what about how you get to and from home? And how you go shopping for food? You can go on the bus, take a couple of cloth bags, go to the store, load up, go back on the bus. What about carpooling? You got a class of 30 people like this. All you need to do is have the people at the offices that run this place, and I'm sure Julie knows everybody that runs this place after all these programs you've gotten going. And you say, look, we'd like to have a little thing on our computer registration. You all can register by computers nowadays. So it just says, would you like to participate in carpooling? Well, you're at the answer. Yes. May we share your email address? Yes. Then the computer looks at your zip code, which is about a 2-mile radius or less, and everybody else has got the same day and time schedule that lives in your zip code, they give an email address to. And your carpool. That parking lot out there is unbelievable. It looked like San Francisco Airport walking across that thing today. And I have a feeling those are all like one person per car for the most, I'm not sure. But anyway, I know people always say, there's just winos and bums and homeless and demented axe murderers and stuff on the bus. I say, come on, give me a break. I'm on the bus. I mean, if you would take the bus, you would raise the socioeconomic profile by 10 or 20%. Get your friends on there, you could take over. Maybe someday you could aspire to be a bus driver. Work your way up to a light rail, then Amtrak, then the bullet train. It's a limitless future, limitless resources. Look at all that timber out there. Whoops, wrong speech. Energy. You're going to live through the age of renewable energy coming on as strong as it's going to ever come on. This is probably going to be the most pioneering time for you to steward or direct or manage this country into a new direction. Companies are spending tons of money on photovoltaic development. I was talking to Stuart and Julie and Kristen and Mark about 3 weeks ago. We all had dinner finally for a long overdue dinner. And I said, Stuart, how much are your panels output? He said, 200 watts each. I said, think of that. I said, how long have your panels been up? I can't remember what he said. Okay. My panels have been up for about 10 or 11 years. Now, just in 6 or 7 years, my panels, which are the same size as the one Julie and Stuart have, 2 feet by 5 feet long, mine are 100 watts output. Theirs are 200 watts. Just think of that technological development going 100% off the same size. 100%. Boy, don't you wish your paycheck could go up 100%, or don't you wish 100% faster getting out of school? Or 100% less hours at work for the same pay? It's amazing. And wind energy, that's coming on strong. Tidal power. You know, we spent almost $1 trillion fighting over oil. As I said earlier, you know, we spent about 150 years just trying to get it associated well enough with each other and getting tired of being manipulated by England and the king that we broke away. After 150 years, we formed a democracy. And I think it was amazingly arrogant for our president to think that he could just wade into Iraq, a country without a history of developing democratic ideology, and say we could just go in there, depose the dictator, and these people will want democracy. And I think, well, it took us 150 years of social evolution living together as a homogeneous people coming from England to here. How in the world do you think you just come in and tell people, you're ready for democracy? Here, do it. You don't just do it. It's not like going to Long's drugstore and buying Band-Aids. You know, there's a lot of stewardship here. All of these things need you folks. Now, I do want to caution you, because I want to stop. I want to caution you that you don't try to do everything. In a class like this, in the classes that follow in environmental studies, you're going to learn A through Z topics, ones that are extremely discouraging and sometimes frightening when you learn things about carcinogenic chemicals that are sprayed on conventional food. These are poisonous. That's their intent, is to kill insects. Some of that remains on the food that's sold in the store, or on nuclear power, and the exposures that workers and miners and people who live in communities nearby and people who handle waste storage have that exposure. And people that work in the military that just do stuff like clean off the wings on airplanes so they don't ice up are exposed to chemicals. And people that work in factories making chrome plating on bumpers or lead, batteries. I'll give an example of the craziest thing I probably came across in my whole teaching outside of the topic of nuclear power. This is especially for the women in this class. In 1971, a woman, with the help of National Organization for Women, sued General Motors because she worked in their battery plant. And they said to her, you have to show proof of medical sterilization before you can work in this job, because you'll be exposed to reproductive hazards. Now, I don't know if any of you women would give up your right, even though you maybe have thought you never wanted to have children, but I don't know if you would give up your right to someday have a child in order to earn a lousy paycheck. And that you would think somebody had the right to tell you, you have to give that up. You show us a medical certificate from a doctor that you've had a tubal ligation or a hysterectomy, and then you can come to work for $9.50 an hour and build batteries for cars. And when that lawsuit went all the way up to the Supreme Court, it was overturned, and she lost. She was trying to fight it on the discrimination that they didn't ask men to show proof. Don't touch my testicles. So men that didn't have to be sterilized. It was just women. And they finally said no, that the company could take preventative and cautionary measures in order not to expose women to reproductive hazards. And the company was okay to do that. Now, that is an amazing case. And that still stands. I don't have a computer because the first group of women that came to me ever and I had other groups of women come and talk about the same problem. In the computer industry said, we think we're being poisoned. We think we're being poisoned at AMD and Memorex and Apple and Intel and the rest of the companies. Some of us have had children, but now we don't conceive. We want another child. We don't seem to be able to conceive. Some women have stopped menstruating. Some would have bleeding gums or blurred vision or pass out or lose weight. All kinds of crazy things. And I said, why would I buy into this industry? You can vote with your money. You can vote with your fork. Every action that you take somehow reflects on what you believe in or what you don't believe in, what you hold important or what you don't hold important. So I'm going to stop because there's way too much. I'm kind of feeling myself just starting to rev up, and yeah, please.
What's the difference between making microchips and making solar cells? Is it the same material and the same chemical?
Yeah, the process is pretty close to the same. You use silicon, and the solar systems that are built use phosphorus boron. The early computer industry, and I have to say that now the computer industry does not use trichloroethylene, trichloroethane in processes to clean boards. They use water and a surfactant, which was a major breakthrough. So the people that I talked to 35 and 40 years ago aren't being exposed that way. But because of the fact that I didn't buy into the computer age, at that point, I didn't buy in ever, and I'm probably not going to now. So I live without a computer. And people say, how do you do it? And I say, the old-fashioned way. There's phone books, there's telephone, person-to-person visit, books, pen and paper. They said, pen and paper? I said, look, the most profound document ever written, like the Magna Carta, Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, were not done with a computer. The computer will not make you smarter. It just gets things done faster. And of course, if you lose it, it makes you crazy. How many of you have had that experience? I'm just curious. How many of you have had something wiped out and lost for good? I'm amazed you guys are not all in a mental institution. Really, I would be. I would go in the garage and I'd get an axe or a hammer and I would pulverize that sucker, and that would be the last time I'd ever get on a keyboard. Anybody have any questions? Like, why did you ever sign up for this class? Or what am I talking about? Or you want to challenge me on somehow how I live, or what I do, or anything? What do you think? You have such a good smile. I'm needing some reinforcement here. What do you think?
I was just wondering, when do you have, you have tours of your house, right?
I do.
My sister actually told me about you about 6 years ago.
I've been doing a lot of tours of my house. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Let's do this.
Yeah, I was just interested because she talked so much about your house, and it's such an honor to finally meet you and see your face.
Well, it's a fun little house. I kind of think of it as the grandfather house because it was done a long time ago. And Julie's house is the next iteration, is sort of the second generation of solar homes. Same with Kristen's house. So to me, this is amazing progress. Not only my former students teaching environmental studies, they have solar homes. And I think now this is what I call progress. This is progress that I can see in my lifetime, whereas most of what I saw when I was teaching in my lifetime was right here. And this was a very, very small sort of learn as we go, mistakes and all. The early solar panels actually used gallium arsenide. Arsenic's bad stuff. So they learn too. But if you would like to have a solar home tour, please call that number. Or if you want to get organized together as a group, I did this the last time I visited your class. We had a potluck at the house. It was great. Please.
I read that you don't use the garbage pickup.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm curious because I used to live in San Jose, and I know how difficult it is to discontinue garbage pickups.
You must remember that the first response, and then the second, the third, and infinitum of any bureaucrat is no. Whenever you ask to do something, whether it's a college administrator, when you're trying to build the Kerr Center, I'm sure they would say, oh, we can't do that. No, that's not a good idea. So I went to them. I had, Julie, how much time do we really have here? I don't want to. Okay. When I taught high school, the mayor of San Jose got in trouble for burying her food scraps to compost. And some neighbor called and property and code told her to stop. And I said, that's crazy. I'm going to get that legalized somehow when I buy a house. 2 years later, I moved into my little tract house, illegally composted behind my front fence, paid my bill every month. And then I went down to City Hall and talked to 3 of the youngest city council people that were there. I figured they were probably in junior high or high school during Earth Day, and they might have some sensitivity to environmental ethics. They said, we think this is a great idea. In fact, we didn't even know it was illegal to compost. They said, take a look at your city charter. It said, no putrescible refuse may be kept on private property more than 7 days. So it required garbage pickup. So they said, we'll lobby for it. And they got it passed unanimously. And the city manager sent the garbage company a letter, don't build this guy anymore. He recycles privately and composts. Bingo. However, 15 years after that, they got a new garbage hauler and a new curbside recycler, and then they said you have to pay. So we went back and forth about 4 months in a row, and Scott Valor, who used to teach environmental law here, I think, and also at State, was my office mate, and he said, they can't force you to pay a private company. So we fought them, and they backed down, and I've never heard from them since. But they are adamant, unfortunately. Yes?
There's something about your discussion about preservation that I'm not sure that I followed. You
Oh,
were
okay.
talking about it being about keeping things in a natural state.
As much as possible, like when you go to Yosemite or...
The Amish, I mean, the practice of farming is in...
Right. What they meant, what the Amish meant by preserving was preserving a way of life. Farming, living close to the land. It's true, these people were not necessarily talking about preserving national parks or forest land or rivers or lakes. Yeah, that's a good clarification. But they were talking about preserving a way of life, but also having respect for other people's way of life and not treating people as we did with slavery or taking away land from Indians. How about any of the other questions? So, well, you'll have lots of them when you're done with this class.
I'm having trouble dealing with the cities because I'm trying to build a power plant. You got any advice about ways?
What kind of power plant? What?
I wanted to find out if I put a power plant in the back of a house in a residential area, a solar plant. And they said, well, there's no legislation, no, we don't have any guidelines on this. So they're going to get back to me in a week.
You're talking about a solar-powered plant?
Mm-hmm.
So you're not talking about combustion or a smokestack?
Yeah. There's no noise, there's no waste.
I got to talk to you more right after this. I don't think there's any problem with it. What city are you in?
San Jose.
Okay, we'll talk more. One of my former students is the head of the Green Building Program in San Jose. I'm sure you could get help from Jennifer. Okay, well, the way I always like to close off is look both ways before you cross the street. Eat organic fruits and vegetables. If you love somebody, tell them while they're alive. Thanks. Thanks, Julia, for inviting me here. Thank you.
So, you're going to be going, you got the next maybe 20 minutes or so, I'd like you to go and work with old Max's. You work the one down here, upstairs, Resource Center, and I want you to work with teams, so I want you to introduce yourself to 25 other people. And if you look at there, you select one agency, National Park Service, California Energy Commission, and California Environmental Protection Agency, and look and see if you can find a stewardship theme in your mission statement and guiding principles, if you visit their website. Okay, enter this information in your little journal. We'll meet back here at, say, 5 after. 5. So let's introduce yourself to people around you. And I'll let you work with teams. You might want to say, if people that think you want to work on energy, then somebody with energy students. So if you want to work on energy, there's kind of an energy team. And you have biodiversity and EPA stuff. So you can kind of decide if I want to pick a team that's your kind of same team. Okay, so let's get up and stretch and ask Frank a couple questions.